The Rise of Generic. Generic. I felt like I was watching a big generic blockbuster that left me shrugging my shoulders at the end going, meh. You hungry? It suffered from a lack of vision. It suffered because of predictability. Oh, this is great. It's so good. Look, I find a lot of complaints filed against this trilogy to be dumb. Like when people complain that there's an Anakin-sized helmet in the spaceship and Anakin blows up the space station because he's good at desert go-karts.
Hey, he's talking about the wrong trilogy.
Or when Rey stood toe-to-toe with Kylo. Or stopped the transport alongside Kylo. Or fought Snoke's guards. Or when Luke flew like goddamn Maverick and blew up the Death Star because he was a bored teenager in bumfuck nowhere, shooting roadside rodents with a Ruger 22 for fun, and had Magic Man whispering in his ears.
But he was Anakin's son!
Or how Ahsoka beat everyone. Or how Rey's good at things. There are countless examples of that kind of stuff in Star Wars, and it doesn't bother me. No, the things I don't like about The Rise of Skywalker aren't necessarily Star Wars things. They aren't even logical problems with the external structure or the internal character choices. They're movie things. They're story things. They're generic things. They're boring things. They are parts that remind us of the worst times. They are parts that remind us of the worst time.
Oh, they needed 2 lightsabers. Duh.
Anyone whose life energy is especially supernaturally delicious and nutritious is in for a hard time.
But TLJ left them with nothing to go on. It's the best they could have done.
Huh? What? Well, that's a silly thing to say. They're writers, that's what they do. They pick up where others left off. They create stories with what they have. They literally had a 2-year internal break in universe movie time between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. Could have done anything. Basically a clean slate. A lot of unique and interesting things could have been thought up. A lot of unique and interesting things they could have done that wasn't bringing Palpatine back to sit in a chair and shoot lightning into space. TLJ left them with nothing to go on. Come on. That's dumb. Palpatine being back, or at least the way Palpatine was brought back, felt like such an awkward turn of the wheel into a telephone pole. So, since we found out that Palpatine was coming back during Star Wars Celebration on April 12th, 2019, I constantly said, I'm reserving judgment until I see how it's executed. I bet his presence will be subtle. I can't imagine he'll be shooting lightning out of his fingertips. And then he shoots the most powerful lightning ever into space! The idea, the concept of resurrecting Palpatine, it never sat well with me, but I was holding out. I tried to avoid doing that knee-jerk reaction thing that so many do. And when The Rise of Skywalker started, I knew, right then and there, that some of my biggest eye-rolling what fears were about to come true. Unimaginative, uninventive, and mulching over the same shit. I think that's what I continuously come back to when I think about this movie. How just kind of unimaginative it felt to me. How shoehorned so much of it seemed. Palpatine coming back with a giant-ass fleet that was conjured, and how hand-wavy and who gives a shit the explanation and announcement of it seemed, even internally in the film among characters, was enough to make me contemplate losing the battle with my bladder and leave my seat, which I've never done for a Star Wars movie.
I'd rather piss in a cup.
I held back judgment. I remained optimistic. I waited with an open mind. And when it started, I realized how forced, uninspired it would ultimately feel to me. Snoke is like a clone or something, like from a Build-A-Bear factory, like sitting in some juice with other Snoke body parts or something. There's so much going on in The Rise of Skywalker, so much being told, new plot threads that fizzle, so much being shown. It felt like a sprint to the finish line, and the track was littered with people throwing water balloons at you. Stop, I can't see, there's too many water balloons in my face. I can't see where I'm going, I can't see the track anymore. A convoluted mess with every step.
You're a Palpatine.
In 2015, J.J. Abrams said, quote, "For me, when I heard Obi-Wan say the Force surrounds us and binds us all together, there was no judgment about who you were. This was something that we could all access." I really feel like the assumption that any character needs to have inherited a certain number of midichlorians or needs to be part of a bloodline, it's not that I don't believe that as a part of canon, I'm just saying that at 11 years old, that wasn't where my heart was. And so I respect and adhere to the canon, but I also say that the Force has always seemed, to me, to be more inclusive and stronger than that. Close quote. That quote echoes my lifelong view of the Force. So the idea of having a character from nothing, from nowhere, was an incredibly interesting turn of events. Rey from nowhere is the most compelling thing about the character, or rather, was the most compelling thing about the character. The constant need and desire that some have to want bloodline relationships between characters, constantly new and old, is something that has always made the universe feel small to me. It's never been something that's interested me. Rey being a Palpatine does nothing for me. Rey from nowhere is actually Rey Palpatine, isn't that neat? Hey, isn't that cool? Don't you think that's really neat? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that amazing? Look, there are things I like about the movie, of course. Primarily the relationship between Rey and Kylo, Rey and Ben. It's always been the most interesting thing in this sequel trilogy. But when I say generic, I mean it felt big and for the most part shallow. It felt like it was pandering to the most basic Star Wars fan need that I have inside of me. Didn't challenge me, didn't bring up new concepts. It wasn't inspiring. It felt like you could replace any of the characters, change the name of the film, and it would be a science fiction fantasy flick that would be forgotten in weeks to come. Oh yeah, I forgot that I saw Jupiter Ascending. It didn't push boundaries. It wasn't inventive or unique. It felt like it was made by a fan fiction phone app. But hey, that's just me. Maybe I need to watch it like 20 more times to really understand it or something. 2/3 of the sequel trilogy was great. I had a lot of fun. Hey, at least we got The Mandalorian and the Clone Wars to look forward to, right?